Hey everybody, Mean Joe from Balsa USA back once again for another episode of the Toledo 2020 experience. So this episode I'm going to be talking with John Crisp. If I'm not mistaken, he's a Toledo native. We met John a few years ago at Toledo. He walks up to the booth and he says, "Hey, I got this full-scale triplane." And he shows me some pictures and it's phenomenal. And find out he's got the kit, he's got all things aviation related. He's into it, and I thought it'd be cool to have him on the show. So thanks for being on the show, John. We really appreciate your time. I know you got lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, it's very cool. So John's into a lot of cool stuff. I'm very envious of his astronomy pictures. I believe that's one of his images right behind him in the monitor there. He takes a lot of really cool pictures. And he does a lot of really cool stuff. And of course, me being the airplane nut that I am, I gravitated towards all of his airplane stuff. I believe we had talked on Facebook, and then 2 or 3 years ago, John walks up in the booth and said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I was like, "Hey, you're John." He goes, "How did you know that?" And I'm like, "Well, I pay attention, So, yeah, and it's awesome. So, John, tell me a little bit about how you got started with aviation.
Yeah, so quick little background story. My dad has always worked in aviation, and my grandfather as well. My grandfather worked for Boeing in World War II, B-17s and B-29s, and he ran what they call the special project shop, if I got that right. Basically, anything on the manufacturing line that they needed troubleshooting with, they called him in, and so he was integral in those projects. And then my dad worked at Rockwell when I was a kid, so growing up, I was always going out to the plant and seeing Bob Hoover fly the Aero Commander that my dad worked on at the time, and this P-51 Mustang. So aviation really was very early memories for me, and one of the first really vivid memories of not only airplanes but the Fokker triplane that I have a very close association with and fascination and obsession, whatever you want to call it, was I got some dime store. They were these neon colored little toys, basically, and they were all World War I airplanes. There were Spads and Newports, and the triplane just stood out to me. And I knew even at that age, and I don't know how old I was, 3 or 4 years old, it's like that's the one that just got my attention. And I still feel that same way when I see a triplane today. For my 8th birthday, I asked my dad if I could get an airplane ride, and I got a flight with Bob Hoover. Took me up for my first airplane ride. I was 8 on my 8th birthday. And I was hooked. I knew I wanted to be a pilot at that point, and started getting into model aviation and just progressed from there. So those were some of my early how I got into it. Did all the control line stuff, and as I got older and could afford it, started moving into radio control, and did a lot of scratch building as well. I love all the what if airplanes, the prototypes, the stuff that the Germans were designing at the end of the war, World War II, and just all of it. But knew at some point I was going to be a pilot and was going to own a Fokker triplane. So fast forward to meeting up with Robert Bosley at Aerodrome Airplanes. He was selling a kit. I was like, I got to have one. So I called him. We talked. Couldn't find a kit that anybody was building around me at the time. And finally, in 2004, I was 1999 when I first met Robert. But 2004, I started my triplane, and took 10 years to build and had it ready to go in 2014. And along the way, did a lot of model airplane stuff and done a lot of scratch building designs and kits and you name it. I've got a complete workshop in my basement. I normally do my videos from down in my basement, but today I'm up in my office. And so I've got probably 100 model airplanes or more down there, and full workshop and video studio. So it's kind of a nice place to do that stuff.
Very cool. I'm working on getting through. Here we go. This is what I was looking for. I was looking for your triplane build. So this is some of the cool stuff that John's doing. I think it's this tab here.
Yeah, there you go.
So this is when John talks about the fact that he's working on a triplane. This is what he's talking about. So he's actually scratch built. And what scale is that again?
3/4 scale.
So he's got a 3/4 scale triplane, and it is just super cool. You can see, we were talking before the show, aluminum frame. I'm assuming this was concept.
Yeah, so that's actually a third scale Sopwith camel that I scratch built. I took the actual, I have them down in my basement still, the original Sopwith drawings, and I needed to learn how to do metal fabrication. So I've done a lot of woodwork over the years, models. And so I said, you know what? I need to learn how to do this metal fabrication and rivets. So I found a company that sells micro pop rivets, and that was all hand scratch built, all hand fabricated. That hundreds of hours into that project, that's sitting in my hangar as a piece of hangar art. And so it was going to be radio control. I still might finish it at some point. And then another one of those airplane projects that you've got. So I have a lot of projects, as you were touching on, as an L4 Grasshopper. That's a 3/4 scale. Again, took the drawings. That's all my own engineering with help of Lockheed Martin. My dad and his buddies at work always backstop my engineering calculations. But that's a scratch built plane that I've got out in my hangar. I've got the wings. That's actually about 80% done. That's kind of my next year project, next winter. So those are just a few of the projects that I do among many hobbies, and then back to some of my triplane pics. But that's me sitting in the cockpit making motor noises, right? Airplane noises.
Make airplane noises. Yeah, that's got to be what you do.
Yeah.
So this is what John was working on, and actually, this is a picture of that airplane in flight. There's another gallery in here. I'm trying not to do too much personal Facebook diving.
Oh, it's okay.
While we're doing this.
There you go. That gallery.
But this is the gallery of the finished product.
Yeah. So that is the culmination. I figure I've got about, I don't know, 1,500, 1,600 hours of building and painting and time in there. And while it was a kit, it really is a bunch of parts in a box with a bunch of rivets and bags. All the gussets are cut, but everything else is just drawings. And you really have to understand, metal fabrication. I had to learn how to do fabric and paint, all of those things, the baffling of the engine. That was all my design, because I'm running a Volkswagen engine in that airplane. It's 100 horsepower. It's a dune buggy engine, basically, with a reduction drive. They tend to run really hot. So I put these cheek scoops inside of there to help with the cooling. But I've got 21 flights on the airplane now. And the triplane, as I learned, I'm certified in over 40 types of airplanes. And I've got about 1,500 hours of time and about 500 hours of tail dragger time, roughly. The triplane has a reputation of being one of the hardest airplanes to land, probably next to the U-2 and the Pitts. Triplane is right up there in the top. So if you want to hold on that picture for a second, Joe, what makes the triplane so tricky is there's no dihedral, so there's no inherent stability. You get wing blocking of the elevator, and you get airflow blocking of the fuselage of the rudder. So you really are actually out of control in that airplane, the transition from a wheel landing to sticking it. And anybody who's flown an RC triplane would be able to relate to that. Plus, very short coupled, and you have no fixed fin. So I am constantly correcting that airplane in flight. So it's very fatiguing to fly. I typically only fly 15 minutes. To my longest flight, I think takeoff to landing was 52 minutes. My feet cramp, and I mean, it's uncomfortable, but extremely satisfying to have pulled off a successful triplane landing. And you really never stop flying it until it's in the hangar with the door shut. So,
right. Yeah. And that's one of the things, we get a lot of folks asking questions about, triplanes, and, I've heard they fly really bad. But that's exactly why we get a lot of people coming to us. That's not what it looked like. That's not what it's supposed to be. That's not scale. The reason it's not is because of the things that John is actually saying, and all of those nuances of the triplane compound as you design the airplanes and as you fly the airplanes. So, obviously the RC airplane is going to be even a little bit more tricky than flying the full scales, right? Because you can't feel any of that. You're doing it from the ground. So that's why a lot of people, and believe it or not, we get a lot of people that I hate to say complain, but that's exactly what they do, is they complain because that's not scale or that's not right. Well, the reason it's not right is because we want to have a model that is enjoyable to fly. Nobody wants to go out to the field and fight an airplane for 10, 12 minutes at a time and feel exhausted every time they get the thing on the ground.
Right.
So for us, one of the things that I've noticed since I've been at Balsa USA is the triplanes that we offer as the kits fly phenomenally. Where they get tricky is on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So you just got to practice with them. I say it all the time, buddy box with that thing. If you've got one and you're building it and you've never flown one before, find somebody that has and buddy box with them and have them show you what it's supposed to feel like, because it's a entirely different beast when you start trying to fly these things from the ground.
Yeah.
That's a great perspective.
And a good point and a couple of tips for those that want to take on the triplane, and kudos to your engineers for designing out some of those bad habits. They're a beautiful airplane to fly in the air. They're balanced so beautifully in the pitch axis. It's amazing. And even though the Sopwith triplane had ailerons on all the wings, the Fokker design only had them on the top. The ailerons are very responsive, but the trick is mixing in some rudder. And then the other thing on the ground is hold up elevator and apply power gently. You can't jam the throttle. And you can tame the triplane. You just have to, my advice anyway, for anybody wanting to fly one, and it's very rewarding, you wheel land. I've only 3-point landed my triplane one time, and it's a beautiful day. It was a calm day, but I wheel land and fly it onto the runway, and you'll be okay. Just have to be mindful of the characteristics. But it's funny. It's another one. It's hanging right above my head right now. My little killer laser cut triplane. I've probably built and scratch built and done, from that little rubber band powered model to 1/3 scale that we'll talk about in a minute, and my 3/4 scale. I'm fascinated by the triplane. I just think it looks really cool. The engineering behind it. It was the stealth fighter of its day, and it was something a lot of people don't understand too, that the Germans had done different in World War I than anybody else was doing, is they had thick airfoils. All the British and French designs had very thin airfoils, and they made the stall characteristics really bad. And they were all trussed by wires. You shot away a wire or an attachment point of the wire, and the whole thing it's like a box kite, it would just fold. Or the triplane and the Fokker D7 and the D8 later in the war were all cantilever construction and rugged, and they could take a lot of punishment. But had a lot better stall characteristics than the sharp leading edge design. So, again, back to translate that to the RC world, you can design some of that out. If you fudge a little bit, and I always tell people, I don't have a replica. That's a period factory built, official parts and the same techniques and fabrication. These are representations. And I think people need to understand that if you want it to fly well and be manageable in the air and handling and be enjoyable, make it a representation. I don't get hung up on the fact that my cowling is a little longer than
right.
the originals. I'm not running a rotary engine, so I can't say I've flown a full replica triplane, but I feel pretty good about what I do with my triplane.
Right, yeah, absolutely, and it's to boot, it's super cool.
Yeah.
So, and I apologize, I said that backwards. The characteristics get worse as you get smaller. That's what I meant to say, not that it gets easier as they get bigger. The characteristics get more pronounced as it gets smaller. So as a extra kind of added little thing here, I got to get the right screen up here. I'm still learning this program, so it's taking me a second. Sure. This is the one that we did. This is our new 1/6 scale, and this is a flight that I got actually at Cincinnati last year that a good friend of mine, Lee, was able to film for me. And you can see this is the small, tiny little electric powered 6 scale. And even with that, it is super maneuverable. And you'll see here, I've got a little segment here. They always laugh at me for it because this thing will literally, with this setup that I have that I'm running in, it will literally hover. And I joke around all the time. That was an often unknown fact that's part of the reason why the Baron was so successful was because of torque rolls. So he that's how he stayed on top of everything like he did. But see, the thing is, and this is the reason why I'm pointing this out, is at this scale, all of the issues that John has brought to light are compounded. So the triplanes, they get worse the smaller they get. So that's interesting. That you said the same thing about the full scales, and I've had several conversations with the guys at Rhinebeck that are flying them, and they'll all mimic the same stuff. Here comes the torque roll. This is the reason why. Oh no, that's the wing over.
Yeah.
Here it is.
There it is.
Yeah, there's why the Baron was so successful. He could put it into a torque roll and. Just kidding, obviously. But so, and to me, I'm in the same boat you are. The triplane is actually one of my favorite airplanes to fly RC, and it's also one of my favorites to see because they're beautiful. They're so pretty.
They are, and people know it's a triplane. I mean, it's so distinctive, and you see the iron crosses or the bent crosses, the Ritter Cruise and the Valen Cruise. Those immediately identify. It's one of the most recognizable World War I designs. So a few dimensions off here or there, I don't get worked up about that. Some people do, but I'm one of a handful of people in the whole world that have ever flown one. So I feel good about that. Like I said,
yeah, and you should.
Fun, yeah.
Yeah, and the pictures and stuff are awesome. And I think that was actually this picture I'm going to show here. It's actually the backdrop for this episode. But this picture right here that I'm going to bring up was, I think, the first picture you sent to me. I think you said, I like triplanes too, or something like that. And this was the picture he sent. And of course, me and John immediately started to converse after that. That is just the coolest picture ever.
Yeah, the ultimate selfie, right?
Yeah, I love that. That is so good.
It's amazing. It really, my wife and I talk about it a lot. And so talk a little bit about the airplane. It's based loosely on the Great Waldo Pepper. I didn't try to replicate the patterns exactly, and I didn't put all the markings exactly are to the movie, but a lot of people immediately identify it as the Ernst Kessler plane from the movie. And I always joke I would have been in the squadron, but it wasn't his exact airplane. I did that on purpose because I was able to put my wife's name on the side. I had to find a woman with an L name. In the movie, it was Lola. My wife is Lori. So
very cool.
Yeah, but we talk about it a lot. When I open my hangar doors and see it sitting there, it still is a pinch me moment. I hear angels singing. We like to joke that. It's in there. It's mine. I built it and I get to fly it. It still doesn't feel real. And then I see pictures like that of myself sitting in it and flying it. It's like, that was a good day every day.
Yeah.
I get to fly.
Dan Lantis asked if you've rolled it on the runway yet. Rolled it. He may mean in the air.
Yeah, rolled it. No. The thing about it is it's capable, but Robert Bosley's very clear that he doesn't want you doing aerobatics in it. And to me, having flown it, I don't want to do any kind of envelope pushing to get it into a spin. I'm spin certified right and left. I did that early on, aerobatic certified as well. I won't do aerobatics in it. The engine's not really designed for it. It's putting stresses on it that it really wasn't designed for. It's enough of a challenge and a reward to just go fly it around the pattern. I've done some pretty aggressive steep rolls and turns and, not full wing overs, but enough maneuvers that it'll do it in a heartbeat. It'll loop. It'll do all of that. But
there's just no reason for it.
No reason to take that risk. I'll do it with my RC ones. I'm not going to do it.
You don't want to break stuff and have Doug have to go in there and fix it.
That's right. Yeah. I saw Doug.
Actually, he popped in. I saw that, so I had to give him a shout out. Doug's John's mechanic. So the whole thing is very cool.
Yeah, he's as much of a reason that airplane flies as anything. I just get in and push the controls around. But,
I hear that a lot. Yeah. So one of the things that caught my eye that I thought was very cool is this post from yesterday. If you guys follow me, I did share it, but I'm going to share it again here as soon as I get to the right thing here. This was, to me, very cool. So tell us a little bit about this before I roll the footage.
All right. Yeah. So one of the things that anybody in model aviation are probably aware of, the guys over in the Akron area at Flight Test are really inspiring people to get into aviation, which I think is great. I tell people all the time with my hobbies, I don't want to do them for a living. I just try to inspire people, whether it's photography or my telescope or my models. And there's been this kind of trend to go bigger with this foam board technique and common available materials. And so I thought, well, I'll do a big triplane. And then my dad passed last year, and really to kind of as a tribute to him, because he helped me build my my 3/4 scale, but my flyable one. And I thought, this will keep my mind off of it, and it'll be a fun tribute, and it'll be a way to push this. So I sat down and took the original drawings. I didn't make any modifications to the dimensions, other than I did put a more modern airfoil on the wings. And my own engineering, my own design. And again, Doug was integral, a lot of head scratching and back and forth. This was all my own engineering, my own design outside of, I didn't design the airplane in and of itself, but it's all yardsticks and U-channel aluminum and foam board and plywood. And it was just a fun project. I worked on it. I started it in late September, and yesterday was the maiden flight. And I didn't finish painting it, because if something were to go horribly wrong on the first flight, which they can do, especially when it's home engineering,
Right.
I wanted to not have spent that extra time. But that's what you're seeing here. A few months of a bunch of styrofoam in the basement.
This is very cool. I saw this yesterday, and it just caught my eye. That doesn't have any gyros or anything in it. That is full on flying.
That's all hand flying right there. Only thing I've got I don't have any rudder mixed. It's and a 30% expo, and I was on high rate, so a few places you could see it. It was a little bit windy, a little bit 5 to 7 mile an hour. Not terrible, but gusting probably to 10. Still trying to kind of get a feel and get it trimmed. It's that first trim flight. It needed some up elevator, but it flies very heavy. It weighs 20 pounds. I've got a 150cc electric equivalent running on 10S, so 2 5-cell 5000s, running with a 250 amp speed controller, swinging a 32-inch prop. And it could have flown on a lot smaller setup, but I needed the nose weight, as everybody who's built the triplane knows. They need some nose weight. But that's the cowling is just hot wire cut foam, and it flew fantastically well. I didn't have to put any rudder or aileron trim in at all. Just like I said, it needed a little bit of up elevator, and I'm going to have to shim the horizontal stabilizer a little bit, because as it got faster, it was wanting to tuck the nose down. And I attribute that to the fact I didn't put under cambered airfoils that the original had, so I'm not producing quite the same amount of lift. But it was a very rewarding moment, certainly. And it normally after every flight, I would call my dad and talk about it. I was not able to do that yesterday, which was a kind of a little bit of a downer, sad moment. But I know he's probably grinning ear to ear watching.
Oh, I can guarantee it. Yeah, that thing is just beautiful, and you did a great job. You and Doug together did a fantastic work on that. It's really cool. I saw that yesterday, and I was showing it to everybody. I'm like, check this out. This is cool.
Yeah, well, thanks. It's for me, like I've talked about, I've got 7 or 8 triplanes at different scales, RC, and this one is the biggest one I have, and it's not my first or only 1/3 scale plane, but it's certainly my first big triplane like that. And I thought I had double checked all my dimensions and calculations, and I had got it right, but it was a tricky situation to get that thing out of the basement and into my truck to take it out to the field.
Oh, yes. You don't have to tell me, Joe, about getting planes out of the basement. I know.
Yeah.
I can tell you.
The outer wing panels come off, the bottom wing's removable, but we had to take the center section of the top wing off to get it through the basement stairwell to get it up. But there were a couple of moments I was stuck going, okay, where do I gotta move my hand positions and shift my body around, and it just barely got out.
Just fold it in half. It'll work. It'll still fly. Doug will fix it.
Yeah, right. That's right. We can rebuild it, right?
Right. Yeah, I have that same issue here. I've got a stairwell. Stairwell is a straight stairwell, but at the bottom of the stair there's a wall, so I have to maneuver through and around and up at the same time. Yep. And I've got right now down here, I've got a 3rd scale Cub. 3rd scale D7. There'll be a 3rd scale Albatross at some point. In and out I like to try to do my maintenance in the shop when I can. Every season I try to bring them in and go through everything. Yeah. But it's starting to gravitate since I built the new trailer setup where I can get some of that stuff done in the trailer, which is nice because I'll heat it, I'll cool it if I need to. But yeah, I can completely relate to the whole getting it up the stairs thing.
Yeah, I'm going to have to bring it down to finish the paint, and then I think what I'm going to do is keep it at my hangar out at the local airport where my triplane is based. I certainly want to get that side by side picture, and I'll do some forced perspective where it'll look like they're the same scale.
Yeah.
And if October happens down at the Dawn Patrol Rendezvous at Wright Pat, I've had my triplane down, my flyable one once. I didn't fly it; I just had exhibited it. But I'm going to bring this one as my radio control model. I probably won't bring my other one. Taking it apart and re-rigging it, it's too much work. It's flying trimmed out beautifully right now. I'm not going to take it apart and bring it down. And it's too far to fly. I could fly for 2 hours on a tank of fuel in my triplane, but it's too fatiguing and it's too much risk.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I knew that we had talked about that before. One of the things when this whole social distancing thing's over is I'm going to have to bring a trailer up there and we'll go out to the field and do some flying because I really want to see it fly in person. That thing is just cool.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. I might be speaking out of turn, but I've talked to a couple of people, and it sounds like right now the information that I have on my desk says that the Dawn Patrol Rendezvous may actually end up being an every year thing. It sounds like the new guy running the whole place, the general, and I don't know what his name is, but from talking to several people, he's reached out and asked the question, why aren't we doing this every year? And the question or the answer was, I don't know, because they said we could only do it every other year. So
nice.
It sounds like that's going to be some changes coming. Fingers crossed. I honestly think we're going to be out of the situation we're currently in by then. That's quite a ways away.
It's a while off. Yeah.
And I'm hoping that all comes to fruition because it's one of my favorite events. I've got a couple of big ones on the list. The number one and first and foremost is going to be Rhinebeck, of course, because of just the history of the place. And second one on the list would be at the museum there, only just because we not only get to fly there, but then we get to go play around in the museum as well. And that's pretty cool place to go hang out. So
it is. And anybody who has any interest in aviation or World War I aviation, you'll see more. I had for years tried to find a triplane flying at an air show. Myself, Chris Hill, and the old Rhinebeck people are the only triplanes flying in the Americas, North and South America, that I know of. They have some in Norfolk. They've got them around. Canada has a few. A few of Robert Bosley's designs will fly. Guys will fly 4 or 5 flights, and then they never fly them again. Because I think of the challenges to fly them. There just aren't many opportunities to see them. Then I go to Wright Pat for the first time in 2007, and there were 3 of them there flying. And I was like, that's the place to go if you want to see triplanes.
Right.
At that point, my goal when I started building my triplane was to do the air show circuit. I have a very busy job and, family and all the other obligations. And the amount of work it takes is just to take the triplane apart and re-rig it is always tricky. But there's a guy, Russ Turner, that lives down near that area who has calls it Airdrome Lanois, and he's got a beautiful facility, and he's got a sock with camel and a couple of other things that he's got going on there. And all the guys that fly into the rendezvous now meet up at his place a couple of days early and get their planes assembled, get the FAA inspections, and then fly them on over onto the base. And I'll do that at some point, maybe next year. I want to get more hours. I want to hit 40 flights on my triplane before I take it apart again, and I'm at 21.
Yeah, and I don't blame you at all for that. That it comes down to safety and comfort, and just to go play, it's too much of a risk, and I totally get that. That's 100% the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it's a lot. You don't want to miss a cotter pin or a nut on something and have a problem.
Oh no, not when your butt's sitting in it. That's for sure. It's different to misassemble the triplane when I go to the field to fly the RC stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. Well, that's awesome. You got anything else you want to cover while we've got you?
No, I mean, if you guys want to talk a little bit, I don't know, the astrophotography stuff, I'll just throw a mention in there. There have been a lot of great people that I met in aviation, and you had mentioned earlier about flying clubs and things like that. You always run into a few prickly people, but almost everybody I've met in aviation have been just fantastic people like yourself. And everybody you run into, it's a very social community and everything. It seems like in the astrophotography and astronomy world, you run into the same thing. You go to these, astronomy or physics conventions, and there are a lot of people that have aviation passion that also have telescope and astrophotography or astronomy backgrounds as well. I don't know why that is, but it seems to be the case. So that's one of my other hobbies, and you can see a few of the pictures there. I'm very fortunate in a lot of things. I've just had a great, blessed life. I mean, I've got toys, and I've got a understanding wife, which is the linchpin and cornerstone of it all. And have the capabilities I have with my my hobbies have been absolutely wonderful, and I don't take it for granted, and I'm very appreciative of it, and certainly enjoy meeting the community and the people out there. I just wish I had a little bit more time to do that, but when I retire,
yeah, for sure,
I'll get even more active in the social sharing. But I'll bring my triplane over to Oshkosh. I'll bring it out more. When I stop flying it, I'll still keep it until it ends up in a museum somewhere. But in the meantime, I can keep doing all my other hobbies along the way.
Heck yeah. And just from my perspective, being a photographer as well, the astronomy stuff is phenomenal. Something really to be proud of, the work that you get done out of I'm oftentimes very jealous of your astronomy photography. It's very, very cool.
Thanks. Well, it's one of the things I don't, as you can probably determine from talking to me, I don't do things the easy way. I always am a glutton for punishment, do it the hard way, scratch building. And in photography, which is tricky enough, but night photography and then take it to astrophotography has really taught me a lot of interesting skills. And I'm an amateur. I do internet code work. I mean, I'm a software engineer kind of as a background for my day job. But I have some fun, interesting hobbies. And I just wish I lived in a climate where there was more flying weather and more astronomy weather, but I don't take it for granted when I get it. I certainly appreciate it. I was outside last night till, I don't know, it was after midnight, probably 1 o'clock in the morning when I finally came in from my observatory. Clouds were starting to roll in, but it's been fun.
Very cool. Well, John, we're about at 30 minutes right now. I want to wrap this up here. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to come on and share your hobbies and interests with us. The triplanes are very cool. I look forward to getting with you soon and maybe doing some flying and checking stuff out.
Sounds good.
And very nice. I appreciate everybody that showed up. I want to remind everybody that right now this weekend, the Toledo 2020 Keep Calm and Build On sale is going on at balsausa.com. Enter coupon code, all caps, no space, Toledo 2020 for your chance to get all show pricing on all kits and all kits accessories that we would have had with us in Toledo. And also, if you enter in that coupon code, you will be entered in to win a 1/3 scale, fully laser cut, all redesigned Balsa USA Sopwith Pup kit. Again, John, thanks very much for your time. You should give your wife a big hug and tell her we appreciate you letting her come out and play, because she seems to be very patient, and just like mine is. And it's awesome that we have great wives. I knew as soon as I saw the picture of the pup in the wireframe in what looked like the den that your wife was a saint. So
yeah. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for showing up. And as always, thanks to everybody that showed up on the live stream. We really appreciate your support. And again, thank you very much for watching, and happy building.